Hello and welcome to Recyclist. I'm your host, Eric Provost, and I am being joined today by a very, very special guest. Really excited to talk to this gentleman and all the really cool stuff that he has going on over at Sniffer Robotics. Please help me welcome to the show right now, Rob Reale, the Director of Sales and Marketing for Sniffer Robotics. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I love the shirt that you're wearing. You and I had an opportunity to meet over at Archon, Swana's Archon event up in Columbus, Ohio, as of this recording a couple weeks ago. And drones are cool was the predominant message
I
I
have to
got
get on
from
my
there.
tippy toes, but yeah.
If you're listening on Spotify, he has a very wonderfully lime green "Drones Are Cool" shirt on. So I'm really excited to talk to you about how cool they actually are. But once again, sir, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. And not only are drones cool, but we've got a cool color scheme, or at least a color scheme that you won't miss, right? So I guess that's
Absolutely.
subjective, but I think it's a cool color scheme.
Well, like I said, we met at Archon a couple weeks ago. Did you guys have a good event?
We did have a good event, yeah. And it's that age-old debate with conferences, right? How much do you get out of them? What's the return on investment? And, we need to really at least close one deal out of a conference to make it worth it. And so we've got a couple leads that we're tracking down, and it's that big dance for marketers, right? Prove that ROI. And
Absolutely. Well, I had a chance to meet you guys, like I said, and actually see you had a drone on the floor that you were flying around and had a little bit of fun with. But I wanted to make sure to get you on the show properly and talk to you about it, because this massive new wave of technology that is kind of finding its way through the industry, I think, is very exciting for a lot of people. The potential applications, I think, are very exciting, and I'm really interested to get into this with you. But just very quickly, for yourself, sir, like I said, you are the director of sales and marketing over at Sniffer Robotics. But what's kind of your background? What's been your journey through the industry?
Yeah, so my gosh, about 30 years ago, I started in the kind of advertising and marketing game, and found myself in construction materials. So I moved from the agency side to the manufacturer side, and so 20 plus years in construction materials. So that's the biggest chunk on my resume. And primarily waterproofing and insulation on all six sides of the building was where our focus was, right? And so I started in the early 2000s as a strategic marketing leader in, internally in the construction materials company. And what a great time, because marketing was in a transitional phase, right? It was that shift from print and traditional media to digital marketing, like, kind of going from the Don Draper to the big data marketing philosophy. And, as the Internet of Things evolves, I was fortunate. I was able to lead the company through that digital transformation, and that's getting us into social media, marketing automation, CRM. And, that's when websites went from really more of a digital brochure to a full-blown interactive tool. Right now, customers could come to our website and get a calculation of what's the return on investment for, every inch of insulation they add, and increase that R value. And, we started adding tools like the roof selector tool. And so, our research told us our customers were confused. There's so many options, they didn't know what to do. So they could enter a zip code and a series of variables, and we could take that zip code and match it up to a local weather station for their weather data. We could look at their building type. Is it highly conditioned space like cold storage or data center, requiring, more air and vapor barrier protection? Is it in a hail zone requiring more durability? So in 30 seconds, we could produce a complete recommendation with justifications for every component. And so whether they were ready to make a purchasing decision or not, they would come to our website and they would leave feeling more informed and getting value. So that was a lot of fun. But we were also on the leading edge of drone technology, believe it or not. And that wasn't really that impressive back then. When I say leading edge, we were using them. And so we would do a lot of videos for our content marketing efforts. And we developed a series called Voice of the Contractor. And so what we would do is we would go on actual job sites and we would ask the contractor all about the products that they were using and why they selected it and what problems that they were solving. And so they were very effective marketing tools, but the video footage wasn't all that exciting. So we needed good B-roll. So we got the original DJI Phantom drone, right? It looked like four bowling pins with an antenna on it. I'm sorry, with propellers on it. And we would mount a GoPro. And, at the time I don't think they were quite 4K yet, but still HD video. And we would do flyovers. And as they're talking about their products or how they installed it or spraying an adhesive or whatnot, you would get this amazing flyover footage. And it looked like we were running a Hollywood studio. And it came from a $400 drone. And, what was a GoPro was about 100, $200. So I would say I was pretty excited to be an early adopter of drone technology, using it for, kind of more of its basic function of capturing photos and videos.
So those, kind of first days when you noticed that, was that a big light bulb moment for you guys? Like, hey, we really have something here. Let's go full force and see just how far this drone will carry us, essentially.
So interestingly enough, not necessarily in that company, but the founder of our company, who we worked together back in the construction materials days, he was the one who really went in that direction. And so he had kind of an epiphany where, and I'll back up a little, we had developed a product called a solar power cap, right? And so what that was actually a final enclosure cover system for landfills. And we would use TPO roofing membrane, so that's thermoplastic polyolefin. And we would mount thin film solar panels to that, and then that would be your landfill final cover. And so now you had a landfill cover that was producing clean energy. It was 100% airtight, which is not the norm in landfill applications. So what did that mean? It meant it held in all of the gases. So there was really zero fugitive emissions, but then you had to make sure you could collect that gas and harvest it into natural gas and product gas. So he went on and he saw the way surface emissions monitoring was being handled in landfill applications. Somebody walking this landfill holding a handheld, CH4 detector, and trying to cover as much ground as they can, looking at the meter, walking on hazardous 4-to-1 slopes. And he thought, man, there has to be a better way to do this, a safer way, a way to automate it to get better results. And he didn't start off with drones, but the light bulb went off for him. And he said, ultimately landed on, we can use drone technology to accomplish this and to get better data collection than we've ever had before. And so he and I kept in touch, and then eventually I moved over to the sniffer side. And for me, it was the best of both worlds, right? Because I still get to play with drones, and now we're using it to do really a lot of good in the environment, right? So every application, what we're doing is we're finding methane gas that would be a fugitive emission. It depends on what you read, but some publications say anywhere from 20 times to 80 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than even CO2. So we're stopping that from becoming a fugitive emission, and then we're converting it and collecting it as renewable natural gas. Of course, we're not doing it. We're finding it and allowing the operators to do it.
Yeah. But is that just kind of the big pitch is, the safety, the accuracy when it comes to using drones for stuff like this? Obviously, like I mentioned, technology has come so far, and the industry itself, especially in the past few years, with the rise in renewable energy. But as that increases, so do regulations, and so do compliance measurements and stuff like that. So is it's almost feels like a little bit of an arms race when it comes to the capabilities of what the industry can produce in terms of renewable natural gas and other resources, and the things they're doing with wastewater now is incredible. Do you think drones are really going to be able to kind of keep up with that that increase in terms of recommended or even required compliance? Because I mean, they're fast in terms of the accuracy. Is do where's the line kind of being drawn there?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head when you said an arms race, right? Because there's so many different technologies, right? So when you look at the compliance side, the the predominant method is still somebody walking a landfill with that handheld detector. That's still the market share leader. I don't have data to say it's what percentage or not, but in it every day, we know that that's still the go-to. Although we're seeing more and more operators turn to drone technology for compliance. Um, and so the sniffer drone is currently the only US EPA compliant method. And that's because it collects samples from the ground, right? It's the only one drone that's dragging a hose collecting ground level air samples. And so if the application is true EPA compliance, that's your quarterly emissions monitoring. Operators still only have two options, and that's the handheld Method 21 and OTM 51, which is a drone dragging a sensor. But there's a lot more applications than compliance, right? You can get emission studies and should get emission studies. So if it's a landfill application, you can still stick with whatever compliance method you're currently using or you're happy with or comfortable with. But between those compliance studies, you can use a host of technology to find fugitive emissions, right? And so that could be different drone technologies. One could be the sniffer drone for sure. One could be a tunable diode laser, right? And so that could be mounted to a drone. It could also be mounted to an airplane. And there's also iterations of them in satellites in space, right? And so what they're doing is they're really measuring in plumes. So they're shooting down a laser and they're measuring a tunable diode laser is measuring in parts per million by meter. So the easiest way to describe that without going into a science lesson is basically you have your leak source here, which is going to be your highest concentration. Then it's going to disperse out in a plume, right? And somewhere up here, and the wind will have pushed it over here, you'll have a different concentration. And that tunable diode laser is going to hit it somewhere and say, what was the average within a meter in that cone of light? So it can tell you there's a problem. It can tell you there's a methane source there. It can tell you there's a higher or lower emittance. But it relies on a lot of different computer modeling and atmospheric conditions to try and hypothesize where did that leak originate. Very valuable technology, right? Because it's kind of a leading indicator of we've got some problems and it can isolate it into maybe larger chunks or areas. Same thing with fixed monitoring systems that are on the ground and they're working in grids and they can tell you there's a high level of concentration in real time. And then, of course, there's satellites that are constantly out there looking for super emitters. And again, what they're doing is they're looking at very large areas and they're looking at plumes. And this data is free for anybody to access, for better or worse, right? And so when these satellites find what they deem as a super emitter, they're going to make a lot of noise about it. They're going to alert the EPA and other regulatory bodies. So again, all different ways to find if there's a large concentration of methane. And it's just a matter of knowing where each technology is a fit. But I think what the industry would love is the quickest, cheapest, easy way to go out, take one snapshot, and say, here are all your leaks. That's just not a thing, at least not with our technology now. So that's where that arms race comes in. And that's where it's important to know what technology you need for the information that's going to help you make informed decisions to reduce those greenhouse gases, to mitigate those emissions, or in many cases to increase your product gas and your conversion into renewable natural gas.
Yeah. And I know necessarily the gas sensors themselves aren't your area of expertise, but it can do, like, we're looking at more than methane. We're looking at more than just that application, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and certainly in the in the oil and gas industry, they're looking at CO2 a lot as well, and that's a more competitive industry in terms of there's more players going after oil and gas because that market's so huge, right? So they're looking at a lot of CO2, they're looking at a lot of methane, but then there's completely new applications. So, for example, one application, and we're going to do some beta testing in this application in Q1, is in the area of first responders. And so, in the event of the, it's never the fun stuff to talk about, but building fires happen, and uh, tanker rollovers, and you know train derailments. And so those first responders oftentimes are exposed to this big plume of smoke, and they don't know what it is, and they don't know how safe or unsafe it is. So you can actually take a drone, fly directly into that plume of gas, take a sample of that gas, come out of that plume. You can measure it on site. The first responders do have the ability to then take this gas, measure it, determine what the levels are and what the type of gases are, and you can do that at a safe distance before sending people into a potentially harmful situation that they don't understand. So that's what's just so cool about these drones is yeah, they're faster, yeah, there's the accuracy, but in my background between construction and manufacturing, the first thing you always look out for is safety, right? It's the number one thing we talk about at every shift meeting. And when you think about being able to send a drone in and find out, how safe or unsafe is that situation, I mean, that's a real game changer.
That's really interesting to think about that type of application because obviously, we've talked about compliance and, meeting standards and leaks, but leaks can lead to much bigger instances. You talk about building fires, landfill fires are a very unfortunate reality of the world we live in. There's leaks at wastewater plants and stuff like that. So, I mean, I would imagine if you can tailor something like a drone to go in and find volatile chemicals or noxious gas from a building fire, I'm sure you could. It wouldn't be too much to tailor that to a landfill fire situation.
Yeah, and so when you look at a landfill fire, uh, what's happening is it's burning up all that gas that shouldn't be there, or not in that volume, right? And I think that's where drones present such a great opportunity for landfill, because you can find it and mitigate it before it gets to that type of catastrophic situation. And so, why it's more difficult to do that with a person is it's almost a sheer volume thing, right? When you think of the scale and size of these landfills, 100, 200, 300 acre landfills, and you're asking somebody to walk that in 30-meter spacing, again, look at that meter, follow a GPS path, hold that meter to the ground. Well, a drone can do that in about, they can do 2 or 3 times as much surface area in, about a quarter of the time. So if you think about that, if you look at a 100-acre landfill at a 30-meter pass spacing, well, what if we could do that at 7.5-meter spacing? And we're getting so much more data for those landfill operators to act upon. I mean, when you think about 30 meters that you're building, and by design, we're going to miss that amount of space, and that's what most compliance is. And I'm not down on it. It's data is better than no data.
Yeah, that's how we prevent the stuff like the landfill fires and
That's
the
right.
methane leaks and stuff like that. I am interested, being the subject matter expert, in terms of the applications and where the technology is currently, for all the operators, landfill owners, and wastewater treatment plant workers and stuff like that. What do you kind of go in? What do you pitch as the plan that people should really use to incorporate drones? You know, if they're thinking about adding drones to their operation, what are you saying? Okay, here's what we think should be your implementation. I'm sure it's not a one size fits all thing, but are there any kind of blanket statements or kind of generalizations that you can make?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never one size fits all. I relate it to building code, right? And again, I'm going back to my building materials background, but we always used to refer to building code as the lousiest building you're allowed to build by law, right? And so we look at compliance the same way, and this is the minimum that you're expected to do. So whether it's a biogas plant or wastewater treatment, landfill RNG, our recommendation is to go above compliance because you can get so much more data that's going to be so much more beneficial to your operation day to day, whether that's preventing fires and fires worst case scenario, but there's still odor situations, there's still neighbors complaining, so much so that you can find yourselves under a consent order, and that's more expensive than any monitoring you're ever going to do, right? So what we always recommend is let's move the conversation away from compliance and let's talk about collecting the most data that is valuable for you to run your day-to-day operations. So we separate the two. And we do a fair amount of compliance work, don't get me wrong, but it's almost a misconception that that is what we do. Really, I think we're most valuable when we come independent of compliance and we perform a study and we're going to get, and I say we, but it's any automated process, has the ability to collect a lot more data that's confidential to the site, right? They don't have to share that with regulators. So what they can do is they can get ahead of compliance. So when they do a compliance study, they've already made those repairs. They've already mediated. And, again, when you look at landfill, they want you to flag anything above 200 parts per million. Well, you can get a study that can tell you, last quarter that was 100 parts per million. This quarter it's 140 parts per million. So now you can get in and fix that before you ever have to report that. And now you're not doing rechecks, and now you're not getting noticed by regulators and DEQs. So that's typically our recommendation is let's move the conversation away from compliance because there's a lot more data to be had, and that's your data, and you have the time to make the repairs because once you're in compliance world, they tell you you got this much time to fix it. And, if you don't do it, you get your hand slapped again.
I know that, you know, just the past few years have already been really, really interesting in terms of technological advancements, and just all the stuff with the drones has only happened in recent years. But in terms of what the outlook for the future of the applications of drone technology within the landfill space are, I mean, just the even the model drones right now. You have a wonderful drone on the banner behind you, but I know that you guys are even already fielding a newer model than that, correct?
This is actually our newest model. This is
Oh, that's
the
the newest. Okay.
yeah, and it's about half. This is Gen 2. It's about half the size of Gen 1. What we are doing is so the model in this picture has been our go-to for the last year plus, and that's the DJI M350. It's a great drone. It has a great operating software. It's reliable. It's everything we want. It's manufactured in China, and so we're starting to see regulations come that and if you go on any government facility, they don't want a Chinese-made drone flown in their airspace. So we're not necessarily looking to go smaller, but it is time for American drone manufacturers to step up their game. And so we've got a chicken or egg situation right now, and it's in our space. It's in first responder space. And I mean, we're a rounding error in drone utilization compared to first responders in other areas, right? So we certainly want uh, cooler heads to prevail at the regulatory level to say, okay, we need to make a shift away. And this is not my decision. They want us to move away from Chinese drones. That's fine. But the American made drones that we've seen aren't there yet. And that's from a price parity and a functionality standpoint. So a lot of our R&D efforts in the coming year are going to be about vetting American-made drones as we look towards the future. The tea leaves are certainly saying that DJI is potentially not a viable option for us down the road. And again, I think that's a problem facing the entire drone industry and all the people who rely on drones for their operations.
Yeah. In terms of new applications, is there anything in the works right now, any R&D on your end that you think looks promising? Maybe not there yet, but potentially some exciting developments in the future that we may be hearing about in coming years?
Yeah, we have three focuses, and um, so the first one I already mentioned, and that's doing hazmat air sampling for first responders.
Yep.
And we
That's
again
so
we
cool.
actually have some beta testing happening in Q1, and so that's really a departure from the vertical markets that we've been in, which is exciting for any business to see that there's a whole new market, and that we could potentially enhance the safety of first responders. Right? I mean, boy, I was very excited to get behind a mission of, well, we're going to reduce greenhouse gases. Well, now we're looking at potentially making things safer for first responders. I can get behind that too.
Absolutely.
Another innovation that we're looking at is incorporating a hydrogen sulfide detector into the existing payload. And I guess that's an important distinction from our perspective, where really from any of the measurement technologies, what we're doing is we're providing a payload which attaches to the drone, right? So we can start detecting hydrogen sulfide, and so that again opens up another application. We do use the current sniffer drone using methane as a tracer gas to find H2S, and that's pretty effective, but it requires that second step of manual verification. But when we can detect actual H2S concentrations on the drone, that will be real valuable for C&D sites and odor control. And, because of all the sheetrock and construction materials, they break down into that rotten egg smell, right? And the neighbors don't like that. And, and then the last one that we're looking at is so again, for our particular technology, we rely on dragging that hose. And so when it comes to the biogas world, we can do the anaerobic digesters. We can fly those. We can fly closed lagoons. Open lagoons become more of a manual process because you can't submerge that hose. So I don't think it's a major R&D initiative, but it's just more a fixed sensor that can get down close to that water level, and for open lagoons, because again, there's a lot of methane mitigation opportunities in biogas and dairies and in those markets.
Yeah. And we haven't really talked about the price of, adding drones to your operation. Um, is it something that is going to be an expensive ask for a lot of operators? Do you think the price is actually surprisingly affordable? I know you might be a little biased, but what do you guys think in terms of the affordability of adding drones right now to an operation?
Yeah, and price is always the $1 million question, right? And the reality is there are options for every budget. And if it's quarterly compliance, under OTM 51, that's going to incur the most short term cost, because that requires quarterly inspections, right? And that's only your initial inspection. Um, and then if there's any rechecks, and as regulations, so currently the rechecks can be done manually, but we're starting to see places like Seattle, California, Washington require rechecks with aerial technology because they're just not looking at the source now. They're looking at integrated grids, which a lot of times is a 25 by 25 meter square, and saying we need to make sure that all those grids are clean. Uh, so, if you're looking at compliance, your worst case scenario because of the frequency is going to be somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 a year. And again, there's factors of what's your path spacing, how many rechecks, what's the size of that landfill. But that's probably the best ballpark I could throw out there. If you get into the landfill studies, and that's what I'm talking about, is getting, tighter spacing, more data, producing more maps. Well, one thing I didn't talk about um, is you take this data and you drop it into an ArcGIS platform, and now you're looking at full color visualizations showing you everything, showing you every exceedance above 200, above 500, or you can flip to a screen that shows you from 0 to 100% methane, right? And so the more data you convert, that can alter your pricing. But if you're looking at a landfill study, a good rule of thumb is on the low end 7,500, on the high end maybe 15,000. And again, are you flying tighter spaces? Are you getting full quantification and flux rates and all these different things that you know data conversion could add cost to it. When we talk in the RNG space, and if they spend $10,000 on a study, the amount of product gas they can take that data and convert that into product gas is a drop in the bucket. So, in that arena, that's really not a lot of money. But the ROI sell is always tough, right? Because you don't know what you're going to find until you find it.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
those are kind of some guidelines to get the conversation. There's so many factors. We'll give frequency discounts if they want us out more times per year, or longer contracts, or mobilization costs of a reality. If it's in some crazy remote area. Uh, and I'll share with you that I do some direct sales. I just lost one it was like in the Yukon. Half our cost is getting there, and I always hate missing out on any opportunity, but at the end of the day, that the mobilization cost is what sunk that one. But as we see more regulations take effect and get stiffer, so Canada has their new ECCC regs. They're in draft mode, and they're expected to take effect in 2007, 27, excuse me. And I've had so many conversations where folks say, "We know who you are, we know what you do, and when the regs take effect, we'll be calling." Um, because what they're doing is they're making it so much more onerous. So tightening those path spaces, and the needing to collect so much more data, that a person walking this and doing it manually becomes almost untenable.
Yeah, that was the biggest reason that I wanted to talk to you, because I know that's a major talking point for a lot of governments, is with more scrutiny and more capabilities when it comes to renewable natural gas, anaerobic digestion, and people viewing this industry in a different light. That's going to I'm sure that the new regulations up in Canada are going to wind up being the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure more and more are going to be coming down the pipeline, which I'm sure is going to be putting a lot more eyes on the potential applications of adding drone technologies, just for again, as you said, supplementing the guys on the ground who can't possibly get everything done as quickly as needs to be done. So I think it's really, really interesting, and I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think everybody should at least check if you're running an operation, I absolutely think that you should look into that for whatever compliance you guys need to fall under, for whatever measurements that you're looking for. Everything that I've seen when it comes to drone technology is really, really cool, and I think that the coming years is just going to make things more interesting, and, to your point, more safe.
Yeah, and from a cost perspective, there's a delta, right? And at the at the baseline regulations, which are still probably the not probably, which are still the majority of the U.S., and that's your 30-meter spacing. We're at parity. Our drone, and I can only speak for our company. Our drone technology is at price parity. Um, but once you start to tighten those regulations, and now you're asking somebody, instead of walking 25 miles, you're asking them to walk 40, 50. What you start to see is the price of automation gets a whole lot more attractive and starts to look better than the walking methods. And again, the data is always going to be, it's always going to be more consistent through automation than a human. The human error expression exists for a reason, and we're not picking on them. That's a really tough job to go out and do all that work manually, and some people do a really good job at it. But once they're out in the fields, you're just hoping that they all do it consistently, and and if I'm facing the possibility of a consent order or any of those types of fines, that to me that's scary, when I know that there's technology that could keep me out of that.
Yeah. And for anybody who's looking at drone technology for whatever reason, point people in your direction. Where can they learn more about how to use drones in their own operation?
Yeah, so from our perspective, come to snifferrobotics.com. And we have a great blog section. Go to what's new, and articles, and we have an article. We've talked a lot about the difference between compliance and emission studies, and which makes sense, and what are the economics. And so there's a full article on that in our what's new section. There's also recordings of webinars that we've conducted, whether that be landfill compliance or RNG, emission studies for increasing optimal efficiency. So that's the go-to resource I would recommend.
Awesome. Well, once again, Rob, I want to thank you for coming on and talking to us. I know there's a lot to talk about when it comes to stuff like this, and I'm may have to have you on in the future, once you can, once you talk to those first responders a little bit more, and get those up in the air to help them out. I think that's a really cool application that I'm sure could very easily wind up saving some lives. So, but thank you for coming on and talking to us about landfill applications and methane, hydrogen sulfide. That sounds really interesting, and hopefully we'll get to spend some more time at the next conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And we're here recording this before the holidays, so maybe you guys can find some drones in your stockings. Who knows? I know you guys gave out one at the conference. You raffled off a drone at the conference. I thought that was really cool. But once again, Rob, thank you so much. Make sure to check out snifferrobotics.com. That will be in the episode description. But do us a favor, after you've checked out Sniffer Robotics, make sure also to check out Diamond Scientific. They are an industry leader in gas analysis, instrumentation, and solutions, the ground walking kind. You can check them. You can check them out online at diamondsci.com. That's diamondsci.com. Or you can even set up a personalized presentation and check out a brand new suite of groundwater sampling products, just by calling 321-223-7500. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the latest episode of Recyclist. Once again, I've been your host, Eric Provost, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.